Bowtech Live and the Nate Zielinski Podcast. This is all about education, scouting, building patterns, and being successful on public land and a do-it-yourself style hunt. A huge thanks to all of our partners, including Bowtech Archery, Diamond Archery, Excalibur Crossbows, Vortex Optics, Ford Trucks, Slumberjack, Bass Pro Shops of Denver, Mr. Heater, Turkey Creek Studios, Ripcord Rest, Tight Spot Quivers, and Black Gold Sights. Join us every Monday night live at 7 p.m. Pacific on the Bowtech Archery or Nate Zielinski Facebook pages, bowtecharchery.com, and or the Nate Zielinski YouTube channel. And remember, tag and share this live feed with your friends and bring your big game questions. And here's your host, Nate Zielinski. All right, how's everybody doing? Welcome to the show. I'm Nate Zielinski here, your host. Huge thanks to Bowtech Archery for letting us go live. As always, we appreciate the platform. Again, our goal here, guys, is all about education. We're a Western-based hunter. I spend a lot of time out here in the outdoors, and again, all we're trying to do is bring our experiences, our knowledge, the things that we encounter to you guys to hopefully build that education. I'll walk through the process of becoming a better and more successful hunter. Again, the objective here is to find more animals and present those opportunities, whether you take them or not, to make those decisions at the end of the day and hopefully put an animal on the ground. So again, guys, thank you so much for joining us as we go live tonight, as we have done for about the last 3 months now, and we're right now in the full-blown hunting season. Depending on where you're at, there's different seasons going on. There's archery seasons, muzzleloader seasons, rifle seasons. Everything's taking place. And we're shooting this show live from Colorado. We are just in the middle of a rifle pronghorn season. We have some Eastern Plains mule deer seasons and whitetail seasons. And we are right on the cusp of our first elk season, our first rifle elk season, I should say, which is probably one of the most licensed sold hunts out there. So a lot of anticipation going into the Saturday's rifle elk hunt. So we're going to be talking about all that stuff tonight. So there's a lot of stuff in store. But we want to start off, guys, with the main thing that we're going to talk about tonight, or the main thing I would love to discuss, is the opportunities that exist in the Western United States. We fielded a lot of questions in the last couple days of people asking about the opportunities. Hey, I'm from the East Coast. Hey, I'm from the Midwest. I'm from wherever. We've been watching your live feed. We want to come to Colorado, Utah, Wyoming. We want to come out and experience an elk hunt, a mule deer hunt. How do we do this? Again, there's a million things that we could talk about when planning a Western-based hunt. But bring your questions tonight. If you have questions right now, you're watching this, you have questions about anything big game related, and you want to ask those questions, guys, bring them tonight. We don't have as much of a topic that we're going to talk about tonight as we normally do. Again, our goal is to ask or answer those questions as they come forth. So, guys, you have questions about building a Western-based hunt, questions about elk, deer, anything like that. Make sure you bring those tonight. So comment below. We would love to have your questions. We'd love to read them aloud and answer those questions live tonight. So again, tonight is all about those questions. So make sure you bring those questions. Again, we're going to answer them live. We're also going to talk about some other things. Again, here in the Rocky Mountain region, whether you're looking at Utah, Wyoming, Colorado, a lot of these western states right here in that kind of cluster, we had a lot of weather movement in the last couple days. Depending on where you're at, some of the extreme high country saw snow as deep as 2 feet. A lot of like the Front Range area, even the Denver area, had anywhere between 10 and 15 inches. So there was a lot of snow that kind of hit various portions of, again, that kind of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah. There was also a lot of cold that hit it. Multiple areas here in Colorado and a little bit of Wyoming had single digits. I mean, a couple places were flat out right at 0. So that's really changed things up as these big game seasons approach. And depending on your style of hunter, what you're looking for out of a big game season, these cold weathers are either helping you or hurting you. And we're going to talk about what exactly these colder conditions and things like that do to these animals, and then you can make that decision if that's going to help you or hurt you. So we're going to kind of talk about that. We're also going to talk about the rifle pronghorns, which will be actually participating on a hunt tomorrow. So excited about that. Have a great buddy in town. My father-in-law's got a tag, so we'll be in the field tomorrow. So make sure you also go to the Nate Zielinski Facebook page as we bring you updates from tomorrow hunt as it kind of unfolds and as it kind of takes place. We'll be in eastern Colorado on that pronghorn hunt, so we're excited about that. But again, guys, bring your questions. To start off, we're going to talk about the elk population here. So we've been talking about pre-rut, months ago. We've been talking about the rut conditions during that archery in that September. Now we're starting to get to that later rut and even post-rut situations. Now, I really don't want to say we're post-rut because a lot of the situations we're still having some rutting activity. But basically the styles of these animals in which we're hunting. So you look at a cow herd. Obviously, elevation is going to have a big role in it. All these western states that have elk, or really anywhere you have elk, you're usually going to have a big kind of swath of different elevations which these elk can live in. I mean, right now here in Colorado, we have elevations of 35 or 13,500 feet that have a herd and populations of elk. So I mean, above tree line, gnarly, sheep type country. We also have country as low as, say, 5,000 feet that have elk in it. And obviously these elk in these different populations are going to vary in their rut conditions depending on the elevation, temperature, and things like that of their basically region in which they live in. So as we're looking at that, that's really going to come into play of how this rut activity is. But generally speaking, your cows are going to go into their first heat, their first cycle, sometime in September, anywhere from very early September towards that later, third week of September. And you're going to have these cows going in a cycle, and the bulls are going to be breeding these cows. When you start to get towards that later September, very early October, all of a sudden you're going to hit that kind of window that all the cows that did not get bred, the cows that did not take, will kind of go into a secondary heat. And that's all of a sudden when these bulls gather these big harems. So a September harem, we've talked about this before, you might have 10 animals, 20 animals, maybe 30 animals in a giant harem. And now all of a sudden you get into that second heat, and these bulls are gathering as many cows as they possibly can in really large harems, just hoping that by playing the numbers, they'll end up with a couple other animals that will still go into heat and they can breed those animals. So a situation like this, a very late rut activity, we see harems as big as 50 animals, 60 animals, 100 animals. I was talking to a good friend of ours who he was actually out this morning, and he basically had two harems kind of colliding together, and he had just a little over 300 animals in this one gigantic harem. We had like 15 bulls, kind of all trying to work these cows, and it was just a kind of a mess of organization. But regardless, this harem was literally 300 animals thick, just for the fact that, again, these animals are in such large harems, with the bull hoping that he still has the opportunity to breed some of these cows as they go into those late cycles or those late heats. So that's basically what's happening in a lot of places. So depending on where you are in elevation and temperature and where that rut phase is, there's still a lot of activity for what you consider a hard-hitting rut. And with that rut, you're going to have bugling. The cows are going to be talking. And we love that, especially as we approach an upcoming season. So this Saturday, like I said, here in Colorado, we have a first rifle season. So it's a 5-day hunt. Obviously, your high-powered rifle permitted. And that type hunt, when these animals are bugling and still kind of in that rut activity, can sometimes make for a slam dunk hunt. You can go out, at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., a couple hours before light. You can do some cow calls, do some bugling, and these animals will respond to you, and you know exactly where they're located. You have to a T. These animals are in this valley here. They're on the side of this hill. And by doing some scouting on previous days, you kind of know the terrain that they're in. And you literally just have to get yourself in that right position. Sun comes up, and you can take that shot, and that animal's on the ground. So really, the opportunity of hunting a rut situation with a rifle can be a very dominating, great season. So there's a lot of hunters anticipating that. Now, a lot of the higher country, even last year per se, this first rifle, these animals, even at 10,000 feet, 12,000 feet, were still in that, the cows were in their second heat or that second cycle. The bulls were still rutting. I mean, even running cows, even callable, where you could actually call a bull in to very close distance, even with archery equipment, and have that opportunity. The seasons have turned. Last year and even the year before, we had the extremely warm temperatures, that rut activity is happening. Now most of our high country is covered with snow, extremely cold, and we're starting to see those real dominant bulls, those big bulls, breaking off from those harems. They're realizing the cold temperatures are shutting the cows down. Again, the cycles are ending, and a lot of times we're seeing these big bulls, the big harem bulls, are breaking off from those cows and starting to go independent. And again, that can be a love or a hate type situation. So even we're seeing it in low country, seeing some of these animals breaking free. But regardless, it's those situations of how am I as a hunter? So with the concept of those big bulls breaking off, the good and the bad of that, the concept with them breaking off is, one, a lot of us choose to use archery equipment during the rifle season. Again, it's one of those things that everybody assumes it's a rifle season. They assume you have to shoot a rifle. But these rifle seasons, you can still downgrade that weapon in most states. We still have to wear orange, orange or pink, I should say, but you can now downgrade weapon. You can use archery equipment. So we see a lot of people that are choosing to hunt later in the season just for the sake of the animals not bedding down as early, more time on their feet. There's a lot of opportunities that exist a little bit later in the season that didn't exist during the archery season. And we see a lot of guys trying to bow hunt during these rifle tags. And the second those big bulls break off and are independent, all of a sudden they're very vulnerable to the archery hunter. So instead of being on a harem with, 90 animals and you're literally trying to sneak up with archery equipment up on 90 animals, now all of a sudden those big bulls are broken off. And the second they break off, they go into rest mode. You think about being a big bull. If you've been running 30 cows, 50 cows, 100 cows, for 30 days straight, 40 days straight, it wears you out. I mean, these big bulls are literally flat out tired. And the second they break off those harems and go independent, they really kind of lead a somewhat low maintenance lifestyle. I mean, they just want to chill out, relax, take it easy. And a lot of times that's going to bring a lot of opportunity to us hunters to chase a single animal and really offer a lot of opportunity with an archery equipment or an archery tag or a rifle tag using archery equipment to sneak up and actually make these shot on these bigger bulls as they go independent. So you have to look at the situation. Most of the areas in which you're hunting, you probably have high elevation and low elevation. The lower elevation, we're still having that rut type activity, big harems. A lot of the higher activity or the higher elevation, we're seeing these big bulls break off of there. You're still seeing young bulls with the cows, but you're literally starting to watch the bigger bulls separate there. Now, we have a clip here in a second, not so much of this, but I showed you, Devin's going to pull up a clip of a bull that was kind of walking around, kind of some shaky scope footage. I was actually watching a very large bull just a couple days ago, right before all the snow. Not that one. We got another one there, Devin? What's the one we airdropped you? 1 second, guys. We're playing this. Guys, if you're on Instagram, you got a second here, jump on over to bowtecharchery.com. Jump on over to the Facebook page because, again, all this footage is playing on those screens. The digital world that we live in doesn't allow us to drop clips on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, jump over to one of those pages so you can see this. But you see this footage, this bull. This is a harem right here, a bunch of cows. I think in total there's a lot in the trees. There's about 30 cows in the trees. This harem right here had about a 365-inch bull in it. A big bull, great bull, nice bull. And this bull was dominating these cows. And literally, I'm sitting here watching this entire herd, sitting with my spot and scope. I got a buddy in town with a rifle tag this Saturday, and I'm watching this big 365 bull. He's massive. Everything is perfect. And literally, I'm watching this bull, and all of a sudden, he kind of puts his head up. He kind of looks around. He picks up some more grass, and he just walks off. Just breaks away. Done. And, he walked away, and I just kept walking. And I'm like, man, what's he doing? Everybody's feeding this way, a whole harem cows, and this bull just breaks off and just starts his march. And the bull never returned. I came back that evening, and that's when this bull came in. And this is a great bull. He's a bull that's going to be an absolute giant in a couple of years. But he's a good bull now. This bull's about 300. Not that bull there. Let's go back. Let's play that clip one more time that we just had on there, Devin. So again, you see this bull. He's in the left-hand corner, down low left. You'll get a little bit steadier footage. Sorry, guys, I'm on a window mount on my truck, and everything's rattling and moving. It's kind of windy where my truck's at. But you see that footage right there? That bull's there on the left. He came into his prime. That bull's been a satellite bull for literally the last 5 weeks. That bull has not had a chance at the cows, hasn't been able to do anything he's been wanting to do. And all of a sudden, that big harem bull broke off, and that young bull had his shot. Literally had his chance to be famous. So that young bull was beyond excited about that. So I literally watched the big bull break off and watched that young bull come in, and all of a sudden, bull that I had seen now for the last 4 weeks. I've never seen him that excited. I haven't seen him bugle that much, and all of a sudden he's working the cows, he's bugling, and he turned into the dominant bull. And it's just kind of the pecking order that takes place. That big bull, whether the cows weren't in cycle or whatever happened to it, that big bull decided, hey, I'm done with these cows, and he broke away and walked off, and that younger bull came on. And that's the things that were happening right now. So no matter where you're at, a lot of times you're going to still find the big bulls with those harems, and a lot of other times you're going to see those big bulls just now breaking off. I would say that I've seen a handful, not a ton, but a handful of these bigger bulls breaking off of those harems literally in the last 3-4 days. I did not have a really good day yesterday. It was snowing so hard I couldn't see, so I did not have a very productive day of scouting yesterday in that storm. But I'll be out actually pronghorn hunting tomorrow, and then Thursday, Friday, we'll kind of get a final note of where these animals are at before that first rifle season actually comes to play. And most of the rifle seasons, a lot of these Western United States, is going to start this coming weekend. So a lot happening with that type thing. But again, the moral of the story, we're talking about the opportunities that the animals are there. So whether you're a rifle hunter, whether you're using archery equipment, a lot of guys are now using crossbows during these rifle hunts. Know what your animals are doing and really try to set yourself up for that right situation. We've, again, been fielding a lot of questions about this type of stuff. A lot of people are really concerned about the snow. The later rifle hunts, the third, fourth, where guys depend on migration to bring the animals to them, those guys are beyond excited. But a lot of the people that draw this first rifle tag are all in hopes that the animals are going to be bugling, the animals are going to be talking. And with that said, the snow can obviously hurt those type things. So know your animals, know your situation. Get out there and do that scouting. Again, lower elevations, you're going to have more opportunity at rut activity, more the traditional style bugling effect. And in the higher country, don't be surprised if you start to see some of these bigger bulls breaking off. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just kind of know where to look for them. Plan on looking for an independent animal, and possibly don't really plan on hearing as much bugling or things like that, as that kind of is going to come into play and kind of slow things down. But keep all those things in mind, and hopefully it helps you out build a very successful hunt. The other big thing that the snow helps us with is going to be both on the mule deer and the elk side. Guys, the second you get snow on the ground, the second you get those colder temperatures, it is going to extend the daytime activity. Obviously, during all the archery season at September time, obviously the super warm weather causes these animals to bed down super early. So, I mean, the last month, we've literally seen most of our animals bedding down at 7 a.m., 7:30 a.m., 8 a.m. at the latest. And that gets hard. You get 2 hours to hunt them in the evening or in the morning and maybe an hour at the night. And then, so you have a 3-hour day to try to get it done. As opposed to right now, I had animals out in the last couple days until 10:30, even 11 o'clock during the day, in the morning, I should say, and then coming back out at 2:33 in the afternoon. So dramatically offering more opportunity to me, the hunter. So we love that. And that's where we always talk about the crossover hunter. Again, you talk about throwing some cold weather in there for both the mule deer and the elk. If you literally can double the amount of time that you, the hunter, have access to these animals because they're no longer bedded, and they're actually feeding out long in the day because of the cooler temperatures. If I have a bow tag and I say, hey, I'm going to invest in a hunt, if I take a traditional bow tag in September, I might only have 3 hours to chase these animals per day if I'm lucky. If I take a first rifle tag and still bow hunt during that time of year, all of a sudden I might have 6, 8, 9 hours to hunt them during the day. You do the math, you start weighing things out. There's a lot of opportunity that exists during these rifle seasons. So, again, think of that. Guys, we got more to talk about. We're going to ask a couple questions, or answer a couple questions, I should say. I know we got a couple questions coming in, so we're going to answer some of those, and we'll kind of get back to the topic. What do we got, Devin?
All right, with seasons changing, habits changing, what is your best tactic to hunt these animals? Are we still kind of spot and stalking, or is it better to sit somewhere and pattern these animals?
Absolutely. Is it a spot and stalk or is it a sit and wait type game? I try to use the intel in which I have to make those decisions. To be totally honest with you, I personally am almost always about the spot and stalk. So I also break it down to kind of the situation. If I have rut activity, if I even have a hope that these animals are still talking, I always will go out at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., well before light, and I hope to, even if I don't call to these animals, I just listen. I love to hear these animals and then plan the spot and stalk after that. If there's no hope of hearing an animal bugling or talking, then I almost always start my day at the highest point possible in which I still have good wind. And it's important to throw the good wind thing in there. So many people just think about climbing to a high point to get good glassing, but they don't know what their wind is doing, and they ruin a hunt before it even starts. So if I can get to a high point to where I still have good wind, I love to find my animals and build that plan. Whether it's, hey, they're on this hillside, I can get to them, by the time they bed down in the morning and make the shot, great. Or if my morning hunt is nothing more than building intel and hoping that the animals, I put them down in a particular area for bed, and then I hunt them that evening when they come out. If I have trail cameras up, or if I've been scouting and I've been watching these animals for a significant time, if I can predict say 60% of their daily patterns. That's probably the correct number, 60, 70%. If I can anticipate that they're going to walk into a meadow, walk across a valley, walk a certain game trail, if I can say, hey, I got a 60, 70% chance that they're going to do this, then I would sit and wait for them. But generally speaking, I feel that I'm so, just so restricted if I'm sitting in one small, narrow area waiting for them to come to me, as opposed to sitting in a higher spot, or it really doesn't have to be high, sitting in a place where I can visualize and see a lot of country and a lot of animals. It gives me the chance to find animals and make that approach that way. So personally speaking, I'm all more about the spot and stalk, find those animals, build a plan, get the right wind, and then make my approach, rather than restricting myself to possibly having bad wind and hoping the animals show up. But again, if you have a rock solid pattern, whether that's a trail camera or just through scouting, if you know you're on a good pattern and you are pretty confident the animal's going to come, obviously, sitting and waiting is a great decision for you. But again, generally speaking, I would rather sit afar, find the animals, build a quick pattern, and make the approach in the perfect situation. So,
alrighty. You talked last week about angles and long distance type shots. What about from a tree stand and shorter distance? How much does that angle affect your shot one way or the other?
Absolutely. Angle is still everything, even at short distance. We talked about angle last week because we had a good friend. Obviously, we were talking about the sheep hunting. We had a friend with a high power rifle. I mean, shooting a 300 Winchester, a 300 Remington Ultramag short action, kind of a unique round. But at 100 yards, he was like 28 inches off because he was shooting literally vertical, shooting 70 degrees uphill. And we talked about that because so many people, the sheep hunters think about it, and the average person hunting a tree stand thinks about it, but very rarely do we think about all the different angles and actually how much you have to do that. And with that being said, angle is everything, even from a tree stand. And obviously, a tree stand, your angle is always going to change as that animal walks underneath you. So, number one, you always have to know your arrow flight. So at a certain distance, obviously, if it's 20 yards, at a very severe angle, you're going to shoot as if it's 10 yards. Luckily for the average hunter, you're shooting 10 yards, shooting 20 yards, it's all going to be that same pin. So, generally speaking, you're going to be fairly somewhat close at those real short distances. When you start getting out to that 40 yards, 50 yards, that's where it's really going to start to have a major play. In a lot of situations, you will cut your pin distance or your yardage in which you anticipate shooting in half, if not cut it down by 60% in those severe angles. But the other thing that I think, especially when it comes to shooting archery equipment more than anything, is the opportunity of where that actual penetration is going to happen, where that arrow, where that bullet is going to hit and what it's going to do. When you start getting into extreme angles, it's so easy to overshoot a lung or even high shoulder blade an animal and not have a lethal shot. It's unbelievable. Elk are the worst. An elk literally has no problem living with one lung. You one lung an elk and its opportunity at life is probably 40-50%. I mean, it literally has a really solid opportunity to live the rest of its life with one lung. A lot of times disease gets involved and stuff like that, but as far as the actual true recovery of that animal, your odds are slim. So it's an opportunity where you have to penetrate both those lungs. You have to hit something else very vital to bring those animals down. And a lot of whitetails and mule deer are almost the same way. So where literally when you're at those extreme angles, you literally have to really know your animal. You have to know the rough width of that animal. So when you're seeing that animal and you're trying to make that angle shot, you have to understand where that's at. Generally speaking, when I'm shooting downhill, I tend to want to hit the animal on the low side because, again, it's so easy to hit that void above those lungs and go right over the one lung and right into the second lung. Sometimes it's lethal, sometimes it's not. As opposed to shooting lower, I almost always get the top of one lung and the bottom of the opposite lung. So, generally speaking, shooting downhill, I almost always shoot low. On that uphill shot, same thing, I'm shooting low. So, lower is always better than higher in almost both of those angles. But again, you're always trying to think, how do I clip the top and bottom of both lungs in a double lung situation on those extreme shots? Same type thing as far as shooting shoulder blades. My big fear on a shoulder blade shot especially in a severe angle, is happening to catch my broadhead. He could even be a bull, but more broadhead right on the top of that shoulder and getting deflection and having that arrow actually roll down and just run with that animal. I mean, I've shot animals literally almost straight down to where it's so easy to hit that right bone, and instead of getting a true follow through, if you don't have enough energy or enough weight on that arrow, and you actually just kind of follow that bone down, and you basically get a glance or a ricochet. So more importantly than knowing even your distance is knowing exactly where on the animal you're hitting, understand the anatomy on that animal, and making sure that you get that lethal shot. But again, shooting downhill, you're better low to make sure you get the top portion of one lung and the bottom of the other, just like that. Make sure you clip both of those lungs instead of center punching. So have a good idea of where those lungs sit on those animals. Same thing going away. If you're shooting that uphill shot like that, anticipate where both of those lungs are. And again, lower is almost always going to get the job done rather than shooting higher, especially on those severe angles. So hopefully that helps you out. If you need anything more specific, definitely comment back, and we can try to get a little bit more specific on that to get your exact question answered. Let's do one more here, Devin.
All right, one more. Tim McCain, we talked about this before the show, but Tim McCain is asking if there's enough snow up there in the high country to push the animals down.
Absolutely. So you're really going to depend on your situation and how much snow you're in. So you have different opportunities. You have animals that are known to migrate. So you talk about the White River National Forest. So the far end of Colorado. So you're basically dealing with like Baggs, Wyoming. You're dealing with like the Craig area of Colorado, northwest Colorado. You're dealing with that kind of section of Utah. All that area right there is known for a migration. Those animals are used to migrating. I mean, like the bulls in Steamboat Springs, I used to guide there. And our elk used to migrate like 70 miles to their wintering grounds, to where they basically get lower in elevation and their grass is not covered up, so they don't have to work to survive. So you get a 70-mile migration. That herd that comes to like Craig, Colorado, is literally, I mean, thousands and thousands of animals. I mean, hundreds of thousands of animals. I mean, it's insane how many animals migrate through there. If you have an area in which you're dealing with a migration, so if you know these animals are migrating, almost on an annual basis, these animals migrate. The second you start getting that 12, 14 inches of snow, these animals will have that timer go off and say, hey, winter's here. We're starting to get snow. It's time to migrate. So if you're in a migration area, I strongly feel that the second you start getting significant snow, which this last storm might have done for you, you definitely will see these animals starting to show that migration. If you have other animals that don't necessarily migrate as far, a lot of this front range stuff, if you're anything on the eastern, continental divide, like in Colorado, Wyoming, anything on, again, that eastern portion, a lot of these animals don't migrate far. They might come from, if they're a tree line type animal, they might drop down 2,000-3,000 feet in elevation and spend their winters there. These animals that don't migrate as far, and when we say as far, we're going to say a 10-mile route or 8-mile route. If they don't or aren't known to have a major migration, it generally takes more snow. They're not apt to abandon that country near as fast as an animal that is used to having a major migration, if that makes sense to you. So a lot of the animals that I'm hunting, I don't get that major migration from. These animals are going to be, they're rutting grounds, so they're far wintering grounds, to where they shed their antlers. It might be a 5 to 8 mile stretch, but no more than 8 miles. So, it's all very relevant. It's all very close. So these type animals, it'll take 30 inches of snow before these animals start pushing on. So it's going to take a lot of snow in animals that don't migrate that far, just because they're anticipating some snow, melting off. They're anticipating some wind blowing it off. Hopefully that grass returning, be able to stay in kind of their daily habits. So again, if it's a migration animal that's known to migrate, this type of snow is probably definitely going to start moving those animals. If it's an area where you don't have as much migration, these animals tend to kind of stay put somewhat, this snow is not going to affect those animals near as much. I mean, obviously, the average animal is used to kind of pawing the ground, moving its nose around, and getting grass. So if your grass, generally speaking, I'd say the animals are happy to move, say 4 to 6 inches of snow to get to grass. If your grass is 6, 7 inches tall, you're pretty good if you have 10 inches of snow, 12 inches of snow, not a problem for these animals to still feed and kind of get to it. If you have 3 inches of grass and 14 inches of snow, you're starting to get to where it's hard on that animal, and that's where you're going to see that kind of that migration if those conditions continue to last as is. I definitely think you're going to see some separation of bulls and cows anywhere you have significant snow. I think you're going to see those big bulls breaking off. I think you're going to see even the semi-mature bulls breaking off. You're going to see the harems continue with cows and young bulls. I think that's the number one thing that you can anticipate seeing. And then again, migration zone versus non-migration zone. You could definitely see that with that coming. They had some snow predicted for this weekend as well. Kind of coming across all the Rockies region. It seems like they're tapering that off. If we had that snowstorm hit and we start stacking these storms on top of each other, that's what's really going to have a massive effect. I think they're calling that storm off a little bit, so that will help things out and slow things down. But generally speaking, we've had a lot of moisture this year. If that moisture continues, it will be an early migration of sorts to anticipate. So. Perfect. All right, guys. We got any more questions there?
Nope, we're good.
Reading through them all. Perfect. All right, guys, and continue. Offer your questions, guys. We're here to answer them. We're going to talk for a little bit longer, but you have questions, ask them now. We'd love to answer your questions. I know there's a lot of people out there anticipating hunts here in all the Rocky Mountain regions. Again, we're excited about it. Bring your rifle questions. Bring your archery questions. Bring your travel questions. There's a lot of animals out. We've been out every day watching these animals with anticipation for this first rifle hunt. Obviously, we tend to joke around and call this first rifle hunt the revenge hunt. I know, personally speaking, old Ricky that bested us during the archery season. He's a hard, smart bull. Obviously, we have some great thoughts of chasing him as well as a few other big bulls. You can see Ricky right there. It's a June picture of Ricky. That bull is still alive on hoof. And I'll tell you what, it's a good feeling to be in the woods with a high-powered rifle with that bull in the area. So we got a lot of big bulls kind of running around, cruising around, and a lot of these big bulls would have a rough go with a long-range rifle in hand, like it's coming this weekend and the following basically month as the high-power seasons kind of unravel and unroll. So we'll see what happens with all that. But guys, keep that in mind as the snow kind of affects all that kind of stuff. The last thing we talked about with the elk before we jump on a deer here real quick, in the area that you do have a lot of snow, in the event that you have a lot of cold, the big thing that we have changing, obviously we scout, we preach scouting, we're getting a lot of questions about scouting. The biggest change that we see in daily habits is if it's cold enough and you have enough snow, we see the bulls abandon the dark timber. This is what we always call a post-rut pattern. So the elk, the bulls, the cows, everybody will abandon bedding in the darker timber and they start bedding on open hillsides. They still want cover to feel safe. So you have a nice aspen hillside. So if you have aspens coming up, these bulls will bed on these semi-sloped or fairly snoped aspen hillsides to where they still feel safe because the trees are around them, but they also are in the sun to warm their bodies. So we see them bed on scrub oak hillsides, aspen hillsides, even sagebrush hillsides, as long as they're steep enough and they feel like somewhat they have some bushes around them to offer cover to where they're not seen and not as vulnerable. So that's one of the biggest things that we see. That's probably the only big pattern that we see change with the snow and cold. So if you've had patterns through scouting, whether you're archery hunting, rifle hunting, keep that in mind. So if you've had patterns of these animals bedding in the dark timber, you can almost think of the fact that they're not going to bed in the dark timber anymore and they're going to start bedding out in those open hillsides. So as you scout, as you start to hunt these later seasons, keep that in mind because that's one of the great opportunities. Instead of going back to camp and napping or hanging out, a lot of times now you can spend all day in the field and you can glass these open hillsides during the day. And a lot of times you can find some great animals bedded out in the open and put some midday stalks on these type of animals. And presents a lot of opportunity when other people are wasting time. So think about that. The other thing we're talking about here, we're going to take actually a couple more questions. We're getting a couple more. The deer season. I saw, literally last night, the storm cleared, 3 p.m., something like that. And almost instantly, I saw buck after buck after buck starting to come around. We're not going to see rut activity, the very early stages, like early stages, we always say is Halloween. So the end of October is when we start to see, basically the rut activity starting to come out, where we're starting to see more bucks, new bucks. Basically the love season for these mule deer and whitetail starts coming out. And generally speaking, it is Thanksgiving when you are full-blown cranking everything's happening for the average situation here in the Western United States. But the second we get snow, the second we get cold, we start seeing some more animals. Again, I saw 80% more deer activity yesterday after that storm than I've seen in the last month put together. Yesterday I saw 15 new bucks that I had not seen in the past. So literally the opportunity there, I know there's a lot of Eastern Plains hunts going on right now here, especially in Colorado. But again, if you have that tag, even if you have a rifle tag, again, we talk about second and third rifle tags, fairly easy deer tags to get. It's a rifle tag. A lot of bow hunters don't look at those tags. It might be a high point unit to draw with a bow, but you can all of a sudden draw this second, third rifle tag here in Colorado, use your archery equipment during it, and have ample opportunity at a lot of deer, especially as they get closer to the rut. September, they're not rutting in our mountain archery season here in Colorado. Second, third, fourth rifle, they are rutting. Use a bow during the rut, it actually makes a little more sense than it does hunting in September. So again, we always talk about the crossover between guns and bows. There's a lot of opportunity for both of those to exist together. Long story short, the snow came to Colorado, the cold came to Colorado, and with that came opportunity. We're seeing more deer than we've seen. So more than anything, get excited for it. Over the next 2 weeks, we're going to talk a lot more mule deer stuff. So make sure if you're a mule deer hunter, you stay tuned here. The next 2 weeks, we're going to have some guests here, especially probably in 2 weeks, that are mule deer freaks, enthusiasts, people that know mule deer more than anything. So again, stay tuned if you like those mule deer. We're going to take one more question here real quick, and then we're going to talk about the hunt we're going on tomorrow. We're going to wrap it up. What's our question here, Devin?
Scott Willard asked, so you're talking about the big bulls breaking off from the harems. What is the pattern that they're going to?
So the biggest thing, guys, when the big bulls break off the harems, the biggest thing that they're looking for solitude. So number one thing, they generally speaking, the second they break off, they rest. I would say the average big bull, once they actually break from the harem, rests from anywhere between like 5 and 9 days, 5 and 10 days. It's fairly common for them to go semi-dark timber, basically just solitude. They're resting, they're chilling out. After they kind of have this 5-day, week-long, kind of venture by themselves on this relaxing time, then they kind of start getting into their daily habits. Generally speaking, those daily habits are going to be bedding in that open hillside, that open country like I'm talking about, aspen hillsides, oak brush, things like that, where you're going to stay warm. But they also like to hang out near timber. Very rarely do I see these big bulls out in the middle of a meadow, out in the middle of the high country. Most of these big bulls are going to somewhat hang near some sort of safety. So again, whether that's oak brush, aspens, timber, trees, they just kind of hang on the outskirts. So bedding like they normally do, feeding like they normally, everything's on the normal patterns. They're just solo and they're a little more cautious. So again, I don't look for them out in as much open country. I try to find all those nooks and crannies. When I glass a hillside, I check all those edges. You're looking at the bottoms of drainages. So again, you have a nice drainage dipping into some dark timber right on those lower edges. They're not in the dark timber, just on the outside of it in the open, but not way out in the open like you would see younger bulls or even cows or that big bull when he was with a harem. But the biggest thing is they take that break. So the second those animals break off, like I said, generally speaking, you're going to see those bulls kind of hang out and rest just for a short period of time. Then they get into that daily normal habit and patterns as they normally would. But that 5 to 10 days can be rough. I know that the second I start seeing these bulls, that big 365 broke off the other day. I have not seen him since. I know exactly where he's at. I know he has not left. I just know he's in that dark timber. I know he's just hanging out. So we'll see when he reappears. I believe we're on day 6 for that bull right there. But we just kind of watch him every day. And, almost every year after that 5 to 10 days, they reappear and they get back into those habits. So we have one more question here, guys, then we're going to kind of wrap it up.
Bowtech's asking about a mule deer hunt in South Dakota. You want to go?
Absolutely, I want to go. There's rumors that there's a new flagship bow coming out that has my name written on it. And there's an opportunity for me in South Dakota to go on this hunt with this flagship bow, and I am beyond excited about this. So we're very excited to have some new equipment in hand and going on a South Dakota hunt. Just like that, we're planning this hunt in November. Same type thing here. We're waiting for some snow, waiting for more rut activity. You could go on a hunt right now to a lot of different places, and you're going to have a lot of deer. So I say even like right now, you look at Colorado, I would say I'm looking at probably 50% of my deer in an area. So even, if I scout every day in and out, I'm literally probably seeing 50% of the deer. The second we get enough snow, enough cold, whether they're migrating from 5-10 miles away or migrating from a mile away, those big bucks, the second that rut activity starts, they come out of the woodwork. They come out of their nighttime activities. They're not nocturnal. Everything starts to kind of come out and come into play as you start to get this overall cold temperature and the rut activity hitting. So I know that we're trying to hold off as long as possible in the South Dakota hunt, just to let these bucks start rutting up more, let more deer be present, let her have basically the pick of the litter, as we would like to say. So very anticipated about that, guys. We're going to bring you live footage from the South Dakota hunt as well. So you got to make sure, again, as always, text WATCH to 313131 because we're going to have live footage of a lot of hunts, not just my South Dakota hunt, a lot of hunts coming up here real quick. I know Devin here behind the camera, guys. You never get to see Devin. He's going on an Illinois hunt with the whole Bowtech crew here shortly. It's going to be pretty awesome. All right, one more question. Devin keeps telling me one more question. My prompter says one more question.
So with the fresh snow, you ever cut a track and follow track?
Absolutely. Now, the biggest thing that I do with this, guys, is make sure it's the right track. But I'll tell you what, I can't tell you how many elk, especially back in my guiding days, that we did this through. If you know you are on the right animal, or let's just say it doesn't matter, you just want animals. If you cut a fresh track in the snow, it's a ball. Literally, head down, get on that track, and walk it out. You will almost always run into either, generally speaking, you walk into their bedding zones, but it will always lead you right to where the animals are at. And walking a fresh track, as long as you have good wind and you are somewhat a stealthy hunter, I would say cutting a track and walking it out, especially if you're not a picky hunter, I would say your odds of harvesting that animal are in the higher percentages. You're 80-90% success rate by walking out a track. So me personally, I'm usually hunting specific animals. If I can find the specific track to a specific animal, 100%. I would never pass up walking out a track. Big fan of that tactic. So I definitely do that. If it's personally for me, if I don't know what animal it is, I would rather sit back and try to locate that animal and find out what it is before I necessarily walk it out or get too close. Just not to disturb it if it's not an animal that I'm going to pursue. But regardless, walking out a track is a dynamite way to be successful. It's also a great way to learn the daily habits. We're talking about daily habits and how these big bulls act. You walk out a track, you learn real quick the areas in which they're at. Do they walk through meadows? Are they walking on the edges? What kind of areas are they bedding in? How often are they bedding? When are they drinking? Walking out a track can teach you a lot about daily habits and really the daily habits of a specific or individual animal to help you out there, again, learn that education and kind of follow through and be more successful. Guys, before we run out of time, tomorrow I've got a good friend in town. Guys, actually a good friend of mine. His brothers are hunting with us. Just a great family. I've been able to harvest elk and deer and everything with everybody in the family. He is in town. He's actually standing here right here behind camera. We're pronghorn hunting tomorrow. It's his first pronghorn. We'll have footage of that, and he'll be joining me next week right here in studio. We're going to be talking about his progression as he came out to Colorado 3-4 years ago, how he prepped for it, how he trained for it, the success he had then, and how he prepped and prepared himself for this hunt. So again, tomorrow morning we have 2 pronghorn tags going to Eastern Plains of Colorado. The season started Saturday, so we are 5 days in on the season, and we actually did that with kind of a concept in mind. Actually letting some of these animals get pushed around, get pushed into where other places don't go. So we're anticipating finding a lot of animals due to other hunting pressure gathering these animals. So we're going to have a great tactic tomorrow. Going to be hunting pronghorns. And then Saturday morning, my good friend and I will be in the woods chasing some big bulls. So again, next Tuesday, we're going to have follow-ups of 3 different hunts, hopefully some success stories. We're also going to be talking about more opportunities for mule deer, talking to some mule deer experts, and bringing more of all of that footage. So guys, before you leave here, make sure you also stay tuned. Type into your computer right now, your Facebook, Nate Zielinski. Like the Nate Zielinski Facebook page, guys. We're going to have updates tomorrow from those pronghorn hunts, so make sure you do that. And always, always text WATCH to 313131 as we go live with any of these channels on Bowtech. As we have notifications on hunts and all the cool stuff we're doing here at Bowtech, we will send that text alert out to you so you can be prepared for it. Guys, also, make sure you go to the BowtechArchery.com to get all these cool gadgets and gizmos that they're making for your phone, guys. You got to grab some of these things that you're doing for some of your photos, brag to your friends, show your friends, who you sport. Make sure you do all that again at BowtechArchery.com. Guys, I'm Nate Zielinski. Please join me next Tuesday evening as we follow through on all these hunts and more tactics to make you a more successful hunter. Guys, thank you so much. Again, I'm Nate Zielinski, and a huge thanks to Bowtech Archery for letting us go live. We'll see you next week.